regardless of if you think the Arizona Cardinals should draft Marvin Harrison Jr. or trade back, I think one thing is universally understood in Arizona. It's 3 first-round picks is the floor. The rest of the country doesn't necessarily see it that way. Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cardinals. Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the GameTime app. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. So we've got some stuff to talk about today. The comments have been blowing up after yesterday's show. Some good, some I'm an idiot. It's the balance that I love. One thing that I'd like to address immediately before getting into this packed show today is I'm here to give options. Do I think the Cardinals should go one way or the other as pertaining to the draft? I mean, I'm at like 51%. I tweeted out kind of jokingly yesterday, I know exactly what the Cardinals should do. They should draft Marvin Harrison Jr. and trade back without being able to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. because my brain's melted at this point. What's the right move? I don't know. We talk about it every day, but it's necessary to talk about, and my brain continues to melt. Whenever I see a mock having them take Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm like, oh, they should trade back. Whenever I see them trade back, I'm like, oh, they should draft Marvin Harrison Jr. It is the depths of hell that is fun and exciting, and all it has is bountiful possibilities. So when I discuss one option or the other, I'm not really advocating for one or the other at this point. The Cardinals are going to win. They win. What's the name of this game? I win. That's the Cardinals and Monty Osborne going into the draft. They win. And I think that's something that is difficult for Cardinals fans to wrap their heads around, and media members alike, because it hasn't always been that way. Barring any sort of unforeseen wrench that's thrown into the plan, Marvin Harrison Jr. going to the Patriots or something before the Cardinals have the opportunity, the Cardinals win. And even if that did happen, the Cardinals win. So it's a good situation to be in. Okay? Yeah. There was one feisty gentleman yesterday in the comments who was screaming at me saying, why are you telling people that the Cardinals should trade back? It's like, well, it's an option. And I'm not telling people anything. You're all adults. You can think for yourself. But you listen/watch me spew things out of my big dumb face every day, and this is what I'm here to do. I'm here to challenge people, not in a way that is empty, but just think about things from all angles, especially with this draft, because we have no idea what the hell is going to happen. Now, that's it, and I will, broach this topic tomorrow. Should the Cardinals, if they are going to trade back, should they be trying to do it today, tomorrow, so they can set the stage for what they want to do, and if it'll give Monty Osborne more than 10 minutes to potentially have a trade back up option, whether it be into the top 10 or from 27 up. Like, there are possibilities, but there's one thing that's for certain. There's one thing that's for certain. The floor to trade back is 3 first-round picks. And if nobody wants to pay that, what? Oh, shucks. The Cardinals should draft Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4. There are mock drafts coming out of Denver, out of Minnesota, where it's like 2 firsts and a third in 2024. It's not enough. It's not enough. And the best part about this for the Cardinals is they have the best backup plan in the history of the draft. If, say, Monty Osborne does want to trade back, okay, just as an example, and they say, we'll give you 2 firsts, so say Minnesota will give you 2 firsts and a third next year. Monty says, no. You want your quarterback? It's got to be more. You want me to look at Marvin Harrison Jr. and say, I'm very sorry. A better offer came up. It's got to be more than 2 firsts, especially if it's Denver, because Denver only has one. One this year, one the year after, one the year after that. So while that would be more of a future pacing, I think with how deep the draft is this year, the Cardinals would need to maximize with Minnesota's offer, if that's one. Now, what I can't comprehend is people thinking that moving up into the top 5, 4, for this example, would garner any less than 3 firsts. I just don't get it. I don't understand it. And the worst thing that could happen for the Cardinals is they don't get the draft offer they want, if that's something that they're, Monty's open for business, said multiple times, like any rational GM would. They get Marvin Harrison Jr. So if they want to trade back, say it's like, you know what? Yes, Marvin Harrison Jr. could be the next great wide receiver. We don't know yet. A lot of people think that they know the future, which is interesting. And this roster has severe needs elsewhere, left by Steve Keim, who one of my favorite things, everydayers, you'll know this one. One of my favorite analogies to use about Steve Keim is he's like the kid growing up, friend of yours, that would come over and play with all your toys when you were growing up and then just leave without helping clean up. That's what Steve Keim did to this organization. Messed everything up and left. So this may be the last pill to swallow with the aftershocks that was Steve Keim for a decade as GM. So if that trade back does happen, it's got to be for 3 firsts. Monty knows that. Fans, media members from different cities, namely, Denver and the Twin Cities area in Minnesota, think that they could get up there for less. Tough cookies. If they want to get up to 5, they're risking the chance, both of them are risking the chance that the other one will move up to 4 and get the quarterback that they want ahead of them, rendering them moving up to 5 unnecessary. Now, the other wrinkle with this, and I haven't talked about this a lot, and this is that's my fault. Okay. The New York Giants situation is interesting. They're in a perpetual rebuild. I know the other term that people use is is it a rebuild or a retool? But if they want, if Jaden Daniels drops, if Drake May drops, we have no idea what the hell is going to happen. And they want to move up from 6 to 4. That's the toughest one for me personally to stomach, because if the Cardinals move back to 6 and say they even get a future first, okay? Say the Giants want that quarterback so bad that they will give up a future first to get him. The Cardinals will be sitting next to Marvin Harrison Jr., watching him get drafted by a different team. And sure, the Chargers may trade back and all those things, of course. The closeness of those 2 picks, that would make it not worth, even if they move back to 6, you can pretty much draft, Malik Neighbors or Roman Dunes, whatever, Dallas Turner, Joe Alt, they could have gone so many different ways. And that is not worth passing on Marvin Harrison Jr. for. That one future first, even though they're picking out, would still be picking in the top 6. That's the only instance where 3 firsts isn't going to do it to move off them, obviously, because they're only moving back 2 spots. That's not one that's worth it, at least for me. You draft Marvin Harrison Jr. If you're that close, you just draft him. A future first is not worth it. But, with everything else in play, it's 3 firsts or bust. And they may still, if they get offered 3 firsts, Monty Osford may be like, you know what? Marvin Harrison Jr. is too valuable. Just draft him. It's going to be fascinating. But I feel like we all needed to have a kumbaya moment here and understand that it's 3 firsts or bust. And the Cardinals will probably have to give back a 3rd or 4th or something like that to even out the picks, which is fine. But if they're going to move back out of the top 5, from the top 5 out of the top 10. It's got to be 3 first. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen. Please go to @LockedOnAZCards on Twitter. Still locked out of my Twitter account, so there's that. Please go to the YouTube channel, search Locked On Arizona Cardinals, hit that subscribe button, turn notifications on. It's only going to get better. We're getting closer and closer. It's going to be bleeping sweet. Is there any chance that another wide receiver is taken ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr.? Let's discuss that next. Locked On Cardinals. Your team, every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by BetterHelp. I know for me, I work a lot. Constantly on the move. Even though I work from home, it's constant 12, 14, 16-hour days. And I love, both jobs that I have. But, it kind of makes you think kind of wishing you had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? And the best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. And therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time at no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make that switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team, you guessed it, every day. So throughout this process, once in a while, once every couple days, I'll do an exercise segment. I'm trying to work your brain muscle to be prepared for anything that happens during the draft. Now, this is not a clickbait segment because I'm gonna remove the Cardinals from it in some capacity. Is there any chance another wide receiver goes before Marvin Harrison Jr.? Is there a chance? Yes. Is it likely? No. Will the Cardinals draft a wide receiver other than Marvin Harrison Jr.? No. Okay. So this would be most likely if the Cardinals were to trade out of the fourth pick overall. And if this actually were to happen, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is -600 on FanDuel to go first, to go be the first wide receiver taken off the board. Malik Neighbors is +400, I believe. If for some reason the buzz around Malik Neighbors grows and grows and grows, which storylines tend to do as we creep up to the draft, within a couple days away from the draft. We're still a couple weeks away. But if the Malik Neighbors thing continues, the Cardinals may find themselves in the most incredible of scenarios. Now, my favorite scenario, because listen, I got a lot of crap for it when I first tweeted it out, and I don't do things for clickbait. I thought this would be great. This would be the ideal scenario for the Cardinals, where they can eat out of both sides of their mouth and get the best of all worlds. If you didn't see it, the Cardinals, in my world here, the Cardinals would trade back with Minnesota, get 11-23 in a future first, and then they would trade immediately back up to 5 and give the Chargers 11-23, and they'll draft Marvin Harrison Jr. at 5 while getting a first-round pick and still having their bevy of picks in 2024, which would be incredible. It's high, the high wire act, all that stuff. Yeah, I get it. And again, an exercise, but that would be the best scenario for the Cardinals. Get Marvin Harrison Jr. and a future number 1 pick. It's a win. Or, I mean, they could give the Chargers 11 and then that future first, and they could have 23 and 27 this year, you know? Now, if for some reason, we're going to etch-a-sketch that. Gone. So say the Cardinals trade back with Minnesota, and it goes Jane Daniels, whoever the hell it is, and then the Chargers take Joe Alt or something, and the Giants are sitting there at 6. Oh, no, it wouldn't be Malik Neighbors at 5 just for the exercise of this, the first wide receiver off the board. Malik Neighbors, maybe he fits a scheme better, maybe he and Justin Herbert would mesh better, who knows? And then sitting at 6, the Giants are there. The Cardinals could throw the house and move up and draft Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, if the Cardinals are not going to draft another wide receiver aside from Marvin Harrison Jr. if he's there at 4. I mean, that's just obvious. Other teams, we don't know. So if Marvin Harrison Jr. is not the first wide receiver off the board, first of all, that means the Cardinals traded back. And second of all, a team saw Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze as a better prospect. If that happens, the Cardinals can win again and move up and give the picks. And, you know, the Giants need to get better. The Titans need to get better. I can't see a world where Marvin Harrison Jr. drops past 5 or drops past 6. So it's just an exercise, just something to think about. But, I mean, ain't no way the Cardinals are taking any other receiver other than Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4. It's just not going to happen. I know that they've had top 30 visits. I did the top 30 visit list yesterday. It's rapidly changing. I mean, every day names are being added to it. So apologies. I did it. I recorded the podcast yesterday morning. I'm doing it day of now, so I don't miss any news from the night before. But, you know, they met with Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. Xavier Worthy is in Arizona today. He may actually be meeting with them as I'm recording this podcast. So listen, the Cardinals are doing their due diligence. You'll see in the mock draft that I have for you in the final segment, I kind of went a different route. I discussed yesterday, if the Cardinals draft Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, okay, and they don't trade back, that opens up a world where they could definitely take a wide receiver in the 2nd or 3rd round and make that a strength, because the Cardinals need strengths. And yes, okay, whoever was yelling at me in the comments yesterday, first of all, thanks for watching. Love it. I said running back was probably the only strength. And safety, sure, with Budda Baker and Jalen Thompson. I usually mention them. It escaped me for some reason. Mock draft, next segment. I kind of went a different route while the Cardinals drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4. We'll discuss that next. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by the GameTime app. You know, if you're an everydayer, about the GameTime app at this point. Let me just run down some awesome things about it. 1, you can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Flash sales. They have these cool deals that happen for about an hour or so every so often. Like, the pricing is all in, so you toggle the feature that shows a total upfront cost with no surprise fees at checkout, the seat view, panoramic view before you buy the tickets. Click on the ticket you want for an event. It brings you to it, and you can just go like this with your phone. And if you're just listening on audio here, I'm shaking around like a crazy person, where you can see the vantage point from your seats before you buy the tickets. It's badass. It doesn't matter. Coyotes, Cardinals, Suns, Diamondbacks, whatever it is, favorite comedy stand-up shows, whatever it is, it's got you covered. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Lowest last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Final segment, Locked On Cardinals. Alex Clancy here. Thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen. Free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I am your host, Alex Clancy. Thanks for hanging. I know that the repetition of the podcasts are it's more potent than normal. I like to have more original content every day with different things. I just feel like there can't be enough preparation for what we're going to witness. And there's infinite ways that the Cardinals can build this roster. So there's no right or wrong way. It's a pick your favorite adventure path. And it's something that I like to celebrate every day because it's like liberation from the stranglehold of ineptitude from the front office. And listen, I'm a 40-year-old man, okay? I know that Monty Osford has only been a GM for 15 minutes. You know, like he's been here a year. He's had one draft. He's had 2 off seasons, pretty much. Like the beginning of free agency twice. Hadn't done a whole lot in free agency. Added some key pieces this offseason. Added, because you're white last offseason. Brought back Will Hernandez, things like that. Signed Jalti for a hold. But he hasn't done this big splash things. And that kind of off-puts people. I don't know if it's off-putting for people. And I don't really understand that. Slow and steady, whatever cliche you want to use, whatever old adage you want to use. And the draft from last year seemed to be putting the Cardinals in a position to have young players coming into their second year who didn't show what I like to call the oh no moment, where it's like, man, they drafted him way too high. Didn't have any of those, which is great. So now he's got all of the trust from everybody. I mean, not absolute. He's got a lot more trust than the last regime going into this draft. And he's got all of the possibilities in the world. The restrictor plate is off. So I think with every single little wrinkle and possibility that could happen, I'd be doing you a disservice if it wasn't discussed, which in turn makes me talk about it a whole lot more. And I think it's more fun. Leave in the comments. I mean, are you sick of hearing about this? Please. Let me know. Just let me know. And you're hoping that the Cardinals aren't going to be picking in the top 5 frequently after this year. So I don't even know if I want to say it this way. The Cardinals aren't usually in a position of power over the rest of the NFL. And by the rest of the NFL, I mean teams that want that 4th quarterback. So, I don't know. I think it's the 15 minutes of fame that you don't really want because, higher functioning teams are picking in the back end of the first round. But this could be a great transition from what it was to what it will be. And this is something that, is the last little piece to be able to get this team moving forward in the right direction. That's all. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you're sick of hearing about this. I love talking about it. It's a win-win for the Cardinals by the percentages, and it's not Steve Keim drafted. Could be a lot worse. So going into this mock draft, I went a little bit differently. If you missed yesterday's show, check it out. There's one thing that I talked about where if the Cardinals, and I alluded to it early in the show, if the Cardinals do draft Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, that opens up a world where they could take another wide receiver in the 2nd round. Like, I don't see it as a crazy thing. The Cardinals have so many needs, and they have very few strengths. So if they were to take, and I'll show you what I did here as an exercise. I think I did it in a previous mock draft, but it was under the guise of something different. This is going to be a true test on, is Monty Osford just going to take best player available regardless of position in the first 2 rounds, or is it going to be box checking? Which, is going to be equally beneficial for the team. It just depends on, where the talent is allocated with these draft picks in regard to position. Because let's run this down real quick in no particular order. Position of need: left guard, interior defensive line, pass rush, corner, running back as a last one, and wide receiver. All the positions not named tight end. I still think they should draft a tight end in the 5th or 6th round because there's no backup plan if Trey McBride gets hurt. Obviously, you never wish on anything. But, again, the Cardinals need everything. So with that, for YouTube watchers, you'll see this. If you're listening, I stuck and drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, Johnny Newton at 27. Get familiar. If you want to nerd out a little bit, just go on YouTube and watch some of his clips. He's by people that I trust in the highest spaces of NFL draft knowledge and scouting knowledge. Johnny Newton is potentially the best interior defensive lineman in the draft. So while the name recognition isn't there, what is recognized is most likely he won't be there at 27 for the Cardinals. But, I went with what the draft gave me. And then in this exercise, in the second round, I took Troy Franklin, wide receiver out of Oregon. Because if you're one to think that the Cardinals desperately need a wide receiver because wide receiver is one of the most important roster building positions in football, great. Like, I know that they get paid a lot of money now. This is going to be an argument conversation. So if that's the case, why not double dip and take 2 in the first 2 rounds and then fill out the rest in the later rounds with their 3 third-round picks? They got a 4th and 5th. They got a bevy of 6th and 7th. And then with the rest of free agency, you bring in a couple of veterans and then you address the rest later. I think Troy Franklin is the apple of my eye in the draft. I know his measurables aren't great compared to the other top flight. He's in that second tier wide receiver group. I loved what I saw with him from Oregon last year. So Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, Johnny Newton at 27 to shore up that defensive line with the 2 guys they brought in, Bilal Nichols and Justin Jones. You've got the young stud interior defensive lineman. That'll be a strength for the Cardinals. Wide receiver, Troy Franklin with 35 overall. And then the third round, I kind of went, so there was a couple different ways it could have gone. Could have taken a corner that was a little bit further down the list, but I went for best player available at 66. Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M. He's the best off-ball linebacker in the draft. So it's like, well, they got Kazir White, okay? They just brought in Mac Wilson. Why would you draft an off-ball linebacker with the first pick, with their first of 3 picks in the third round? Because the best player available. And you just find a spot. Mac Wilson has played off the edge as much as he's played as off-ball linebacker. So you shift him to off-ball linebacker. You've got your young third rounder to play with Kazir White, and the middle level of the defense is secure in the middle of the field. His measurables are great. He's fast. He's good in shallow coverage, which is something the Cardinals have really struggled with linebackers in the middle of the field in coverage. Pretty much, period. So I think that'd be an interesting pick. And then at 71, edge rusher Austin Booker out of Kansas. You don't see Kansas as a powerhouse. They've gotten a lot better. He was a transfer from Minnesota. He had 8.5 sacks. He had 2 sacks in his first game against Illinois this past season. And he's got speed off the edge. And you can definitely find pass rushers later in the draft. It doesn't just have to be, just Dallas Turner or bust. And then at 90, center Cedric Von Prawn out of Georgia. He started 3 years in a row against one of the best teams in college football. They won a national championship, one of the better run games. And doing this, you could swing him to left guard. Maybe he sits a year behind Jalti Furholt, constantly needing to draft depth at the offensive, just across the offensive line, whether it be injury or outperforming a veteran. This is how you have sustained success in the offensive line, not just piecemealing an offensive line when somebody gets hurt or bringing in, veteran guys that aren't that expensive in free agency. And I got an A grade on Pro Football Focus, so I'm pretty much a draft expert now. So for those that aren't watching on YouTube, Marvin Harrison Jr., Johnny Newton, Troy Franklin to double up on the wide receiver room, and then adding Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch and Trey McBride, that is a very, very young pass-catching core that can grow up with Kyler Murray and can absolutely wreak havoc. Edgerrin Cooper, off-ball linebacker from Texas A&M, best player available, best off-ball linebacker in the draft this year. First round, the first of the 3 third-round picks. Austin Booker, edge rusher from Kansas, really popped last year after he transferred. And then Cedric Von Prawn, the center for Georgia the last 3 years, could be a lot worse than an offensive lineman from Georgia. Let me know what you think in the comments. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Remember, without you, there is no me. I'll talk to you tomorrow.